This is the Spritz Girl Mindset Podcast, and I'm your host, Courtney Young. If girlhood is a mindset, this is where we practice it out loud and unfiltered. We're healing, we're yapping, and we're doing it with spritzes in hand. Here's your permission slip to be soft, messy, and magnetic as hell. So grab a spritz, grab a seat, no small talk, just the real stuff. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of the Spritz Girl Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Young, and I am so thankful that each of you are here and are ready to join me for another season. This one's going to feel a little different than Season 1 because I'm in a completely different season and pursuing kind of a completely different life. And so we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of all of that. I want to walk you guys real time through my transition over the last few months, where I've been, what I've been up to, why I've kind of been feeling the way that I've been feeling, and what's changed for me, because I know some of y'all follow me on social media and you kind of got to see me navigate some of this real time. But for the last couple months, I have very much been in a messy middle season and a season of change and surprise and lessons and just real honesty. I've had to do some real work to get really honest with myself about what it is that I really want. And, I always say it to you guys. I say it in groups and I say it on the show and I say it on social media. If you're not clear about what it is you want and you're not honest with yourself, then what are you doing? Because you're not fooling anyone. You're not fooling the person in front of you. You're not fooling yourself. You're just burning yourself out. So with that said, we are going to get into all of it. And I do have some amazing guests lined up for you guys this season. I'm so excited about them. However, I wanted to open the season with just me and where I'm at and what's been going on in my life. So let's pick up where we left off. So at the end of season 1, everything seemed great. On the surface, I was living a life that I had been very, very comfortable in. I loved the life that I built, and I want to make that very clear. I had been a very successful salon manager for 5 years. I've been in the salon industry for about 7 years total. I'm married. I have my 3 dogs. I was traveling all the time. I got to go to so many amazing festivals and places and see so many amazing friends. And on the outside, it looked like I was living the dream. And I'll be honest, in some ways I was. Getting to go to When We Were Young Fest in Vegas last year was transformative. That was such an amazing experience. I celebrated my 30th birthday and launched the show last year. That was an incredible experience. My husband and I, we're still doing great, going strong. He's an incredible partner and an incredible supportive person. I love my dogs and my chosen child-free life. And on the outside, I looked really, really, really happy. That's the thing about radical honesty, right? I looked happy, and on paper, my life looked fine. It looked great, even. I had people constantly saying, you get to do all this cool stuff. You went to Japan and you went to Europe and you explored the world and you're always on the go. And how do you never stop? And the truth is, I never stopped because I was constantly escaping my life. And I know that might sound shocking, but I was. I had this version of me that just wanted to get out and go and do because I wasn't happy with who I was on the inside. I wasn't happy with who I was at home. I wasn't happy with who I was at work. I wasn't happy with, any of it other than, my friends and getting to go travel and do whatever I wanted and all of that good stuff. And so I realized that there was a point where I was just escaping my everyday. And that was a really difficult realization to come to because we always talk about this concept of surviving versus thriving, right? I was surviving and I had no idea. I was so burnt out of the life I had built for myself, a life I loved. And I will say that till the cows come home. I did love that version of myself. I did love my life I had built. I loved everything I got to go and do and experience. But I didn't love who I was. And if I'm being really honest, I lost myself so hard last year because I was so focused on everyone else and what everyone else's needs were and how I could respond as quickly as possible and how I could get out that I forgot that who I am matters just as much. And it's crazy because that's what I've been telling you guys to do. It's been my whole thing for 5 years. So we are going to get in to the nitty gritty of all of it. We're going to get into the messy middle and how I navigated that season, how I'm coming out of it now. And I will be honest with you guys, I found so much clarity and I feel like the best version of myself. And it's not because I've gone and done more and run around and did whatever. It's because I got clear about what I wanted and who I was. And so when I realized that I was constantly like escaping and I wasn't genuinely like enjoying, the things that I was doing. I mean, I was, but like I would come home and I would still feel empty. I would still feel exhausted. I would still feel the need to go out all the time. I realized that I hadn't forced myself to grow or do anything different in a really long time. I had gotten really comfortable about intellectually talking about, my things and helping other people through theirs. And I stopped pushing myself to get honest. And there's a difference between, intellectualizing these things that we like go through. Like we can talk about the hard stuff all day long, right? Like I can tell you all about, the things I went through in childhood or the things I went through navigating college or how I felt like I was too much or my discomfort with the church or my ADHD diagnosis. Like I can talk in circles around those things and talk all about my intellectual experience of them all I want to. But where I struggle is getting really honest about the feeling in the middle of them. And where I struggle is realizing I don't trust myself. And I know that sounds so silly. It's like, Courtney, you're an Enneagram 6. That's kind of your whole thing. But I think I had gotten so good at the therapy speak and about helping others kind of ask those hard questions that I forgot to check in with myself too. And so I got to a point where I was just so burnt out and I was so exhausted and I knew something had to change. And I realized that the thing that needed to change was me. I had lost myself so much in this life that I had built for myself that I didn't know who I was anymore. And I knew that the only way that I could find it is if I, went rogue. And so I went MIA a little bit. I took a pretty long pause from social media and I decided that I was going to maybe search for a new job, which was really scary. That was a very, very scary feeling because I had built this life as a salon manager and as someone who was one of the girls and like just hanging out and girlhood and culture. And it was great and it was fun. And I got to help people. And I thought I was doing all the things that I love to do. And I was. For so much of that time, I was doing all these things that I love to do. But then I realized that in that role, I had kind of found a way to not look at what I wanted or what I needed out of my own life. I justified staying because it was comfortable and because it was flexible. I was able to travel as much as I wanted to. I was able to, have a 4-day week. It was like a luxury. It was great. And I had convinced myself that that flexibility and that security that I had within that role and the fun was like all I needed. And it wasn't until I realized that I was truly like escaping doing the work and figuring out who I was and running away from that person and not making enough space for myself to find that voice. That was in the way. And so I had to make a really, really, really hard choice and leave something that I really loved. I have so much love in my heart for every single person from that season. And I'm so grateful for every opportunity that I had there. But I needed to force myself to do something new. And if you know me, there's nothing I hate more than being uncomfortable and then change. And I remember just being on the verge of tears every single day. I'm so grateful because I ended up finding my dream role, my dream job. I'm so grateful now being on the other side, but being in the middle was so scary. And I remember that there were days when I really struggled with it because I thought I was making the safe choice by choosing to stay where I was. I thought I was doing the right thing. And what I realized was I needed the space to learn something new. I needed to be pushed. I needed to be challenged. I needed more stability. And luckily for me, I found it. And I realized that staying the same would end up costing me more than changing would because I was thriving in burnout. And this is actually really interesting. So my friend Candace, she's an Enneagram coach and I'm an Enneagram 6. And for those of you who don't know what that means that my core motivation in life is safety and security. Like I want to be safe. I want to not have my stability shaken. That's my core fear is losing that sense of stability. I don't trust myself. And that's something I've really had to work through and we'll get into here. However, if you're familiar with the Enneagram at all, you know that there are areas of integration, right? So we can take on the positive traits and the negative traits of certain numbers when we're in stress versus when we're in growth. And for a type 6, a 6 in stress can take on some of those like negative traits of a type 3. Now, type threes, they're your achiever type. So, they want to be valuable. They want to, bring something to the table that matters. They want to create a legacy. And I didn't realize I was in burnout because I was taking on some of those traits. Like it literally looked like I was thriving on the outside. I was running around. I was doing all the things. I was never taking a break. I would literally multiple times last year, I was out of town for weekends in a row. So I would like go to Atlanta for a weekend for a festival and then come back and go to work and be exhausted and then literally get on a plane the next Friday and go out of town again. And from the outside looking in, it looked like I was thriving, but I wasn't. And I wasn't checking in with myself. I wasn't being honest with myself. I was avoiding doing the work and truly leaning in and trying to understand who I was. And that really surprised me because I like to think of myself as a very self-aware person, but I realized that I intellectualize so much of that and I can talk circles all day long around these things that I've gone through. But I struggle to trust myself enough to get really honest about what it is that I want, which is the exact thing I tell you guys to do all the time. And I realized that if I didn't make a change and I didn't start asking myself and I didn't start looking inward and do the scary thing and listen to my own voice, this was never going to change. I was going to continue living in stress. I was going to continue being burned out. I was going to continue being upset. I was going to continue being sad. I was literally at a party last weekend with a couple of my friends. And one of the first things that somebody said to me when I walked in the room was, "Oh my God, you look like your nervous system is regulated. You look like you got 12 hours of sleep." And like, because I did, because I stopped trying to escape my life and, avoid and do the most. And I started genuinely looking inward and doing the hard thing or what I thought was the hard thing. And I ended up finding this position that I absolutely love in real estate. I'm an executive assistant for a real estate team, the Think Live Be team in Orlando. And I love it. I have never been like a chronic studier. I've never been like a book smart girl. It's just never been my thing. Um, and I'm busting my ass to get this real estate license because I was so excited and invested to dig in and really understand it. And I wanted to be immersed in that world and I just wanted to know more. And I started doing that and I started going to therapy and I found an incredible therapist who, if you're in the Orlando area, I will recommend to anyone. I love him. He may or may not be listening to this. And if he is, I'm sure he's laughing. But I realized that when I started looking inward and I started listening to myself and asking myself those hard questions that I ask everyone else all the time, that my voice mattered too. And it was okay to want something different. For so long, I thought I had to earn the right to want something different because I painted myself as indispensable for everyone in my life, whether it was work, whether it's family, whether it's friends. I needed as a six, as somebody who needed that safety and that security, as somebody who needed that loyalty, I needed to know that I was safe within my relationships. And so I was the drop everything kind of girl. You need to arrive from the airport? I got you. You need me to stop what I was doing and answer a phone call for work at 10 p.m. in the middle of the night? I got you. Even if you could have found the answer yourself, I'm going to stop what I'm doing because I needed to know that I was safe. And it wrecked me. It taught me that everybody else was more important than myself, that I didn't need to listen to myself. I could just listen to other people's needs and meet them, and then I would never get in trouble. And that's one of my biggest fears is getting in trouble. And so it's really embarrassing. And I've talked about this a little bit, but I ended up living life like I was one bad decision away from getting in trouble or from being let go or from being abandoned. And that turned into this terrible cycle of urgency culture and nonsense and escapism. And, I think that comes back to a number of things. Like I said, I do think it was partially because I needed to be like indispensable. I needed to feel safe. I think I also was labeled as too much for so much of my life that the fact that I had a community, whether at work or with friends or, anywhere where I could like quote unquote be my full self, but also be indispensable and also be safe. Like I had convinced myself that I was no longer too much if I was meeting the needs of everyone else. And so I made myself more digestible. I made myself only focus on what everyone else needed. I convinced myself that if I listened to myself or I put myself in an uncomfortable situation that, I would get in trouble or I would, not be wanted anymore. that was really tough. And that's part of why I was constantly trying to escape, because it was like my mind was telling me one thing and my body was trying to escape it. And I want to make it very clear, like, I loved the previous season I was in. I learned so much. I became who I am. But it got to a point where I was burnt out and I was not okay. And I didn't have the capacity to be honest with myself about that. Something I've talked about previously too. When I was in college, I had this whole friend circle, and most of them were through the church. And we were really close for a long time. We were in each other's lives, and we were really important to each other. And when I left the church, that group had kind of, in my eyes at that time, villainized me a little bit. We're like, if you don't want to be our friends anymore, just say that. And you've changed. And we don't really like the person you've become. And I was so angry about that for so long, because I thought that I was being honest about who I was when I came forward to them with all of these things. And when I started like actually talking about my emotions and how I was feeling, and it wasn't received well. And I resented them for that. I was so angry. I was not kind, maybe not like blatantly directly, like to their faces was I an asshole, but I wasn't like nice about it. And I realized in the last year, my husband always says this phrase. He always says that just because something ended poorly doesn't mean that the whole thing was bad. And when I realized that they had decided to be friends with a version of me that I wasn't. I wasn't honest with them in that season about who I was, and not by any malicious intent or any like, purposeful misalignment or what's the word? Deception. I wanted so bad to fit in and for them to like me and to be loved and to not be seen as too much, that I had convinced myself that I was somebody I wasn't. And they agreed to be friends with that version of me. So I can imagine a world where they would feel betrayed because I became somebody they didn't agree to be friends with. And it's not that I became a different version of myself. I had always been that person, but I was never honest with them about that. So that's not fair to them to be resentful and to hold on to like, all this judgment and resentment, because they were probably hurt too. And they were betrayed by somebody that they had agreed to be friends with. And they realized that I wasn't that person anymore. And that has to have been really hard for them. And so I think about that with leaving my current season a lot. And I really, I want to be honest about who I am all the time. I want to show up as my full self. I encourage everyone to do the same. Every single person has a story that matters, and you never know who you're going to impact by showing up as that person. And also, I'm trying to give myself a lot of grace and realize that, yeah, maybe like, I once again kind of fell into the trap of deceiving my own self. And that wasn't okay for me, and it wasn't okay for, maybe other people, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person, and that doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that it wasn't the right time anymore, and I needed to be radically honest about what it was that I needed and how I needed to change. So, the other thing I'll say about all of this is I think it's really easy to get caught up in a healing narrative. If you know me, you know I'm not a fan of that narrative, because I think it roots from this place of you have to fix yourself when there's nothing to fix. It's not about being like a new version of yourself. It's not about like any of that. You were never like broken to begin with. My friend Candace and I talk about that all the time. It always comes from a place of you are worthy and you are seen and you are loved and you are worth doing that work, asking those hard questions for. And I used to talk about this as a youth pastor too. Like there's this narrative that in order to be close to Jesus, in order to like find God and find Christianity, you have to repent and admit you're broken and all this stuff. And here's the thing. I think that two things can be true. I think you can be mature enough to want to do the work and ask the hard questions and get to the root of why you are the way you are. And I don't think that that has to come from a place of like, I'm broken and I'm the worst. I think it can come from a place of I'm worthy and I'm valued and I'm loved. And because of that, when I do choose to cope, when I do choose to deceive myself, when I do, choose the easy route instead of the hard route, like, why am I doing that? And, I always say the way out is through. Like, it's not around, you can't avoid those questions. You can't avoid that work. I could have continued down the path that I was on for forever. But I think about that a lot. I'm like, what if I had stayed where I was at? And you know what's crazy? And this is pretty vulnerable of me to share. When I had multiple interviews for this position that I'm in, and I love it. I'm so grateful. Like I leave work smiling every single day. I'm so grateful. But I almost turned it down. And the reason I almost turned it down was because I was so scared to take the leap. I was so scared to do something different. I had gotten so comfortable and I could have justified that life to myself for forever because, again, on surface, it wasn't a bad life. There was nothing wrong with it. I had just lost myself inside of it. But I had convinced myself that I didn't need to know that person. I didn't need to find that person because everything was fine. And I was getting to do all the things I said I wanted to do. And I am so glad that I stopped and that I paused and I thought about it. And I remember asking myself, like, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Do you want to continue to avoid? Do you want to continue to just escape? Because we can keep doing that. You're only 30. There's plenty of time. Like we can keep running away and not asking those hard questions and not pushing ourselves to be different or better or, do the hard thing. We can keep doing that. You'll get to do a lot more cool shit probably. You won't really have to settle down. And I just remember at one point being at home and being like, no, I don't want that for myself anymore. I just want to be myself. I just want to know who I am. I just want to ask those hard questions. I want to do that work and I want to find something that fuels my passion again. And it was in that moment when I realized well, then we can't stay. You can't stay in the comfortable and pursue this deeper calling to find who you are and find your passion. You can on surface do all the healing workshops. You can use all the language. You can do all the breath work. You can do all the things that you think you're supposed to do and do them right. But if you're not asking yourself those hard questions, you're never going to get to the root of it and you're never going to be honest with yourself. And at the root of it isn't fixing something that was broken. The root of it is radical honesty. I needed to be understood and I didn't need to be understood by anybody else. I needed to be understood by myself. And I needed to give myself that space to do that work and ask those questions and start to build trust for myself. So right now in my very real life, I went through that season. I found the job. I did all the studying. I left. Leaving was so scary. And it was so hard. It was so sad. And I started something new and being new, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I'll never forget, I had a therapist that told me a long time ago, you have to give yourself space to make mistakes. And I'm finding myself now in a season where I'm having to make an active choice to trust and also to let myself be new, to remember that I don't know everything, that my safety isn't on the line when I don't, to give myself the space to ask those harder questions and let myself screw up and know that it's going to be okay. And it has been freeing. It has been very freeing. It has been hard. It has given me a lot of anxiety to quote unquote risk it all. And even over little things to risk it and take a crack at something if I don't know the answer. That is scary for me. I don't know if it's scary for you guys, but it's scary for me, especially when I had lived life for so long, constantly thinking that I was going to mess it all up and I was going to lose this life that I had built for myself because I didn't trust myself and because I didn't listen to myself. Um, and so radical honesty right now in my everyday life is listening. It's sitting with myself. It's asking those harder questions. It's giving myself the space to figure out the answer and to troubleshoot. It's giving myself the space to take a shot at it even when I'm wrong. And so now I feel like in this season, I'm so passionate about refiguring out who I am and finding that identity and finding that purpose. And it's because I've given myself that space. And so I want to challenge you, if you're living life and you're like, well, I don't trust myself. What do I know? I'm no expert. Nobody is. Literally not one person knows all the answers. No one does. And my real estate test was one of the hardest things I ever did. It was a brand new industry. It was a lot of studying. It was a lot of work. I got that license in a month because I busted my ass, but it was not easy. And I remember sitting in that testing room and being like, oh my God, I don't know anything, even though I had studied so much. And that feeling when I passed was amazing. It was the coolest feeling in the world because it was just the culmination of all of my hard work, both like on an intellectual level from like studying, but also from taking a chance on myself to begin with, from entering a brand new industry and figuring it out, to forcing myself to study and build studying habits. Like that for me, like that was very intimidating. And there are days now, I've been in this industry for a couple of months now, and there are days where, it's still intimidating. I don't have all the answers, but we can do hard things and we can be new and we can figure it out. And that is how we get to our story. Your story is not the ending. That's not the part that matters. The part that matters is all the little things that come up in between. How do you even get to the ending if you don't give yourself the space to take those steps? That's what spiraling but on purpose means to me. Right? It means that there are going to be moments where you feel anxious. There are going to be moments where you don't trust yourself. There are going to be moments where your identity is questioned that are hard. And you have a choice. You can either escape and you can seek out other alternatives, or you can get honest. And I think for me, showing up and choosing to get honest has been the most transformative work I've done in a long time. It's It's teaching me so many different things. It's teaching me that done is better than perfect. It's teaching me that, I'm valued for who I am, not for what I do. It's teaching me that I was living a life trying to earn connection and prove connection rather than just showing up as myself. And so what am I hoping to build in this season? I am hoping to kind of give myself a reemergence a little bit, to get to be me and to get to be figuring it out. I don't want to position myself as an expert because I'm not an expert. I'm still learning. I'm still learning in so many different ways. And I'm so grateful that I get to do that surrounded by so many incredible people that push me to be better every day, that remind me why I'm in this industry, why I do what I do, both with my clients and at work and in my friendships. Like I'm truly grateful. Being in this new season, even though it's like so different, feels grounding, and I truly feel like I found my purpose again. I feel grounded, and that's not something I would have told you even a year ago. I'm not constantly anxious. I'm not constantly searching for other things or trying to cope. I just feel at peace and at home in who I am because I know I matter. And because I know I matter to myself, because I'm willing to listen to myself and I'm willing to hear myself and I'm willing to give myself any dynamic that forces you to question that forces you to, run away from who you are is not a dynamic worth being in. I don't care if it's a friendship. I don't care if it's a job. I don't care if it's a relationship. I don't care if it's a church. You are who you are. And that value starts and ends with that. And we can do the work and we can ask the hard questions and we can show up for each other honestly. But it's made clear that you don't belong because of anything else. That dynamic's not for you. And that's the kind of community I want to build here. I want to build a community where everybody belongs for who they are. I want to build a community where everybody can just show up as who they are with what they have to offer. And that's kind of what we're going to get into this season. That's where I've been at. That's been my life the last few months. I've really just been letting myself kind of sit and figure it out. And you know what's crazy is I don't do solo episodes a lot. And you know why I don't do solo episodes a lot? Because I don't trust myself and I don't like listening to my own voice. And I don't think that, I'm an expert or that I have this, that, or the other to give. But I think that's exactly the kind of person that I'm showing up for. And so even putting this out as my season opener and talking as myself by myself and just kind of letting my brain yeah, like that's a big step in trusting myself. And I hope that inspires you to show up for yourself and to trust yourself a little more. We don't need to fix ourselves. We just need to show up for ourselves. And showing up for yourself doesn't look like having it perfectly curated or perfectly put together. It looks like taking that chance, taking that risk, believing in yourself just enough to say a little yes. You don't have to say big yes to everything. It can be baby steps, but you're still worth showing up for. So if you're in an in-between era right now, I really want you to know that you're safe here, that's what this community is for. And we're going to get into all kinds of things around that this season. We're going to talk about messy middles and we're going to talk about identity and about purpose and about showing up for yourself and what that physically looks like, asking yourself the hard questions, getting really honest. This isn't going to be the most curated, perfect, vague, random woo-woo podcast. That's not who I am. That's not what this platform is for. That's not what this is about. this platform is for the person who is listening to this and who is like, I think I resonate because I want to know myself. I want to ask myself the hard questions. I don't like risk. I don't like change, but I'm ready to say a little yes. I'm ready to lean into the unknown a little bit. I'm ready to show up for myself. It's my turn and it's my time. That's who this season is for. Thank you guys all so much for being here. I'm so grateful for every single person who has supported me and supported this podcast and supported this community. Episodes are going to be released every single Thursday for season 2. And I just want you all to know that your story matters. Keep showing up as yourself. Keep being who you are because you never know who you're going to impact by doing so.